Chapter 6. First Night. Gaia World. Day of the Shattering. Powell stood over the spider's wet remains, now only wetness of ichor lingering on the grass, catching his breath as he assessed himself. His elbows and knees had taken a few scrapes from the falls during the fight, shallow cuts stinging where dirt had ground in. His shirt and pants were filthy, streaked with smeared grass and soil. He patted his chest and arms where the purple smoke had seeped into his skin, feeling a brief warmth but no immediate harm. "What was that?" he said aloud, frowning. For a second, he wondered if the spider wasn't truly dead, if the mist was it continuing the attack somehow. But as the weird warmth faded without anything else happening, he pushed the concern aside. Instead, a surge of exhilaration hit him. He just fought and killed a head-sized spider with a sharpened stick. His first real adventure in this world. A grin broke through as he wiped his hands on his pants. And it just despawned. Like in a frigging game. He picked up his spear, wiping the ichor off on nearby grass that was carpeting the ground all around, and froze for a second. Wait. If everything I kill disappears, how am I to hunt for food? He looked closer to where the spider used to be, checking if any loot had appeared there in a truly game-like way. But there was nothing. With slight disappointment, he continued assessing his situation. His right hand still throbbed, the skin irritated and warm, veins pulsing faintly. A reminder of his earlier mistake. Seriously, out of all the stupid things he'd done in his life, sticking his hand into a mysterious substance that appeared out of nothing was probably at the top of the list. It worried him, but he focused on the task at hand. Night was closing in, shadows stretching across the clearing. He gathered more dry branches, snapping them in smaller pieces, and built a fire pit in front of the tent. With a click of his lighter, the flames ignited, crackling as they caught on the wood, releasing a pungent, resinous smoke that drifted upward. Powell ducked into the open tent, spear within reach, and lay back on his sleeping pad. The nylon fabric felt cool against his skin, and the fire's heat seeped in, carrying the smoky aroma of burning branches mingled with the fresh, springtime smell of the surrounding forest floor. He closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. The fight had left him wired, every rustle in the bushes, a twig snap or leaf shift, drawing his attention. On top of that, the burning in his hand intensified, a persistent heat that fueled racing thoughts and kept his mind too alert to relax. After a while, he sat up. No sense wasting time tossing around. Meditation had helped him unwind before. It could work now. Some techniques involved focusing on a single sensation, breath, sound, or something internal. With the itching so dominant, he chose it as his focus. He crossed his legs, straightened his back, and shut his eyes again. The fire's steady crackle filled his ears, its warmth brushing his face. He zeroed in on the burn. A sharp throb in his palm, radiating up his arm like heated wires under the skin. He cycled between clear meditative states, mind empty of words, just raw sensations, and slips into simply thinking about them or his situation. During one lapse, an idea formed. Imagine directing his own inner strength against whatever had invaded him, breaking it down and turning it into his own energy. Instead of having it do anything else, harness it, have it assimilated, and even strengthen his body. The thought grew and evolved gradually. Now, instead of harnessing just the energy that was absorbed from the phenomenon and spider, he fantasized about connecting with the nature around him and drawing something even more from it, having it resonate with his own soul and adding to it. It flowed naturally into his thoughts as weird state of mind. From moments of actual meditation gave him illusions of feeling, just that. He wasn't even sure what was simply observing something that he really experienced and what was just his fantasy. As he started to feel, a surrounding energies flowing all around like a life force emanating from all life around him. He pictured drawing it in, using it to ease the pain and strengthen his body. The visualization helped. The burn seemed to respond, shifting as if being dismantled and repurposed. Fatigue finally pulled him under. As he fell asleep, the fantasy blended into dreams where he continued absorbing that greenish power, drawing it from everything alive around him, The pulse of roots in the earth, the whisper of leaves in the breeze, the distant splash at the pond's edge. It flowed steadily, mending and fortifying him from within. Chapter 7. Acclimatization. Gaia World. One day after the shattering, a thunderous crack jolted Powell from sleep, the sound like ancient timbers splintering under immense pressure. It rolled through the air, vibrating in his chest, followed by a deep, ominous rumble that shook the ground beneath his tent. He bolted upright, heart pounding, the fabrics of tent and clothes rustling from every contact as he scrambled for his spear. The morning air seeped in cool and damp, carrying the earthy tang of dew-soaked soil and the faint, resinous bite of pine from the surrounding trees. Outside, birds scattered with frantic chirps, their wings slicing the air. "What the hell?" he muttered, stepping into the crisp dawn light. Shadows stretched long across the clearing, the grass slick under his boots. He glanced toward the slope he'd descended the day before. Its rise had blocked the view of the anomaly last night, but now, towering fractures pierced the sky, jagged veins of purple mist pulsing higher than before, like frozen lightning inverted. The air hummed faintly with their energy, a low vibration that prickled his skin and carried an unfamiliar scent, metallic and charged. They had expanded, new cracks spidering outward with audible snaps that echoed like breaking ice. Powell winced as he flexed his right hand, the burning sensation milder than last night but far from gone. It had spread, a persistent itch radiating up his arm, past his shoulder, burrowing deeper than skin deep, as if his muscles and bones simmered with low heat. Veins throbbed faintly under reddened flesh, and a faint, acrid smell clung to him, like singed cloth mixed with something sickly sweet. "Damn it," he grumbled, shaking it out. Well, so much for wishing it all away. Anyways, no time to dwell. He needed to move. He drained the last lukewarm dregs from his thermos, the bitter coffee giving him extra energy shot, as he planned the day. First, climb the slope for a better look at those cracks. Then, head to the pond with his slingshot, maybe bag a duck or two amid the reeds. He'd spotted reed mace and calamus yesterday. Nutritious roots and shoots, perfect for foraging if hunting failed or if kills vanished like the spider had. Luckily, spring is the perfect time to eat those, and everything points to him having landed in that season here. He slung his pack over his shoulder, spear in hand, and started up the slope. A few steps in, a subtle warmth flushed his skin. Not from exertion, but something internal, like the first stirrings of fever. He paused, wiping his forehead. It came away damp. "Well, this can't be good," he murmured, but pushed onward. Around halfway up the slope, he realized that the fever was getting worse rapidly. Chills crept in alongside the heat, his vision sharpening then blurring at the edges. No ignoring it now. This was bad. A high fever in the wild without meds was lethal. Plans shifted. From foraging and herbalism tutorials he'd watched, he knew that willow bark contains some compounds that can function like aspirin, and it could be used very simply by making a tea. He'd seen some willow by the pond. He hurried downhill, grabbed his hatchet, leaving his spear and backpack in the camp. The fever was getting so bad that, at this point, if anything attacked, he wasn't going to fight it off anyway. He hurried uneasily through the bushes, each step stirring the marshy scent of mud and decaying vegetation, undercut by the fresh, green sharpness of reeds swaying in the breeze. The fever climbed steadily, sweat beading on his neck, his breaths growing labored as he hacked at the willow branches. He gathered a thick bundle of freshly grown twigs and hurried back to camp as fast as the fever allowed. Back at camp, shivers began to rack him, waves of heat and cold alternating like a malfunctioning thermostat. His vision swam slightly. Movements felt sluggish, but he pressed on, gathering the last of his firewood from the pile he'd overstocked last night. Flames crackled to life with his lighter, the smoky aroma of burning branches filling the air, warm and acrid against his clammy skin. The original plan was to debark it, but with how rapidly things were progressing, there was no time. He chopped the twigs roughly, no energy for precise debarking, and steeped them in his metal pot over the fire. The brew bubbled, releasing a bitter, tannic steam that stung his nostrils. He gulped it down hot, the scalding liquid searing his throat but promising relief. Only then did the fever fully hit, weakness crashing over him like a wave. Sweat poured off him in sheets, soaking his clothes with a sour, feverish odor. He collapsed into the tent, breaths ragged and heavy, the nylon cool against his burning skin. Sleep wouldn't come. The same suffering that made him hope for sleep would not let it come. It wasn't just weakness from the fever itself. Whatever had afflicted his hand and had spread all over now came back with force. His entire body pulsed with waves of burning and pain emanating from every vein at this point. Panic dominated his feverish, tired mind. What was it? Bacteria? Virus? Some spores he inhaled. He was fully aware that entering a new environment could end like this. Could aspirin from willow help at all? He only knew it helps lower symptoms of fever. Does it even help fighting off bacteria? Or perhaps was it something else completely? Chemical poisoning from that purple lightning anomaly he touched so recklessly? He had no illusions about surviving this adventure, but he'd hoped for it to end in a fight. Not like this. Eventually, not able to do anything else and seeing no point in wallowing in misery, he reached for the only tool he had for relief: meditation. He could not even sit up, so he did it lying back. Like last night, he closed his eyes, focusing inward. The crackle of the fire faded, replaced by vivid visions. Greenish auras pulsing from the earth, emanating from every leaf and root, flowing like living rivers through the air. The scent of loamy soil intensified in his mind, mingled with the fresh vitality of growing things. He directed the energy mentally, willing it to combat the invasion. Whatever it was, the purple anomaly's taint, the spider's mist, or just some bacteria, turning it toward healing and regeneration. He visualized the green force dismantling the burn, mending tissues, flushing the fever. Hours blurred, awake in agony, slipping into fever-induced dreams where the auras grew sharper, merging with the intruding energies, converting them into his own. At times, he glimpsed other colors, subtle flows from the distant cracks, alien and untouchable, swirling like distant storms. He couldn't grasp them, only observe. In the evening, strength returned enough to brew more tea. The fire's embers glowed orange, casting flickering shadows on the tent walls, the bitter steam rising like a potion's haze. He drank deeply, then sipped plain water from his bag. Running low now, the cool liquid, a mercy on his parched throat. Back to the cycle: meditate, absorb, drift. The fever eased, the burning sensation receding from his body, though it lingered faintly, like embers under ash. Through the night, certainty grew. These auras weren't mere fantasy. Focusing on a new, nascent sense, he saw them even awake. Energies flowing everywhere, vivid and real. But he couldn't absorb or influence them anymore. The connection had faded, leaving only awareness. By morning, hope flickered. The fever had broken, leaving him weak but alive. The anomaly's affliction was nearly gone, just a faint warmth in his veins. He sat up slowly, the tense fabric rustling as he moved, the air inside damp and sticky from his own sweat and morning dew. It seemed he had yet another day ahead of him. Chapter 8. Foundations. Gaia World. 2 days after the shattering, Powell emerged from his tent, skin slick with dried sweat and head swimming with wooziness. Every step felt uncertain and weak. He sank onto the grass, inhaling the crisp, dew-laden air outside the nylon flap. The morning breeze carried the faint, earthy scent of damp soil and pine resin, a welcome contrast to the stale, feverish odor clinging to his clothes. Is the sickness gone completely? Will I be all right now? He contemplated the unpleasantness from last night and day. Naturally, his thoughts steered towards the weird flows of colors and auras he had experienced in his meditations. He decided these were legitimate visions or a new sight, but it was still hard to come to terms with something like this, even after getting transported to another world. An entire life of conditioning to dismiss any stories about such visions as fake, or the results of drug-induced hallucinations had its effects. Well, fever-induced visions are a thing too, he commented out loud on his own thoughts. Powell closed his eyes, cleared his mind of any thoughts, and took in his surroundings. He could really feel or see something, although it was neither a sense of touch nor eyesight. It was such a weird thing to see colors and movement without using his eyes, so that even doing it now, Powell was still not sure it wasn't just imagination. He sighed, bringing his focus back to immediate health problems. The faint hum of insects in the grass and the distant rustle of leaves in the breeze grounded him, their sounds a subtle reminder that the world persisted, indifferent to his inner turmoil. He instinctively looked at his hand to check on the reddish swelling of his skin, and froze momentarily. Oh! The irritation was gone, but that wasn't what had shocked him so much. Whenever he looked at his hand, his sight had inevitably always fallen on an old scar from his childhood, a reminder of the time a shard of glass had lodged under his skin at some point. He had stopped consciously paying attention to it long ago, but it had always been there. He could not see it now. Was I just not paying attention to it for so long that it somehow disappeared over the years? He mused. He quickly reached up to his eyebrow and touched the old scar just above his nose. It had been practically invisible, but often itchy, and he could always feel the uneven skin under his touch. It was gone. His heart raced. Okay, this is definitely not my imagination. He started pacing nervously around the tent, thinking about the implications. Then he energetically sat on the grass, closed his eyes, and attempted to get into a trance. Minutes passed, but his racing mind would not allow for meditation. Eventually, Powell gave up on those attempts. Right? This is all great, but magic or not, I have no water to drink. That is more important, and I might get the fever again. I don't know what it was. Better get to it. But how? He mused. The grass prickled against his palms, cool and slightly damp, carrying the faint, herbal scent of crushed blades as he shifted his weight, his mind whirling like leaves caught in a sudden gust. He had 2 empty plastic bottles, each 1.5 liters in volume, a 1-liter thermos, and a pot for boiling. That was enough for a 2-day camping trip, when one knew he could always go back home and the containers were already filled with safe water. But it was a lot more problematic in the wild, when traveling and not knowing when you'd find another water source. And there was also the matter of safety to drink. Stale water from the pond was a definite no-no. God only knew what nastiness lived in it. Even boiling couldn't kill everything. Powell knew that streams arising from under slopes of hills like the one he had found were the perfect source for drinking water. It was filtered, seeping through many layers of sand, and after finally flowing on the surface, not recontaminated again. Ideally, he would still want to boil it to be safe, but could he really do it? He couldn't pour very hot water into plastic bottles, and the boiling pot was only 1 liter. He couldn't use both plastic bottles to bring unboiled water to his camp, or they'd be contaminated. So, not only could he bring only 1 bottle of fresh water to his camp, but he also needed to boil 1 liter of it, wait for it to cool down, and then boil another portion. He could maybe do it here, sitting near the water source, but if he ventured out, is it possible to do with the added time of looking for water? Oh well, no better way than to test it, he proclaimed. He used the casing for the tent as a handy bag, even with attached straps, for carrying the bottles and slingshot. Perhaps there'd be an opportunity to hunt something by the pond, and set off to carry out his task. With his first batch, he decided to make a thermos of coffee using his meager stock. Now sitting by the campfire, looking at the boiling water, he contemplated how he'd even manage without coffee in the morning. Magic! He yelled out. How could I even forget that? Perhaps I can get the coffee effect with my ability. He closed his eyes and this time managed to clear his mind enough to enter a meditative state. He could see the auras flowing around him, but any attempts at reaching for them or trying to influence anything in any way failed. He directed his new senses inwards to try managing the energy from the spider and the anomaly, but instantly realized there was none left to even manipulate. That pushed him out of the meditative state. Yes, that would make perfect sense, he said out loud. With accepting that magic was real, accepting game logic came rather naturally. The mist from that spider was probably some kind of reward I can use for my own abilities. But does my mana, or whatever it is, regenerate naturally? The fire crackled softly, sending sparks upward into the air with a sharp, woody scent, while the steam from the pot rose in lazy curls, carrying the bitter aroma of brewing coffee that momentarily steadied his thoughts. His musings were interrupted by the coffee being ready, then drinking it. After that, he made several more trips to the pond and stream, gathering water and edible plants. He also washed himself and his clothes, his skin feeling so icky from sweat that he could not bear it anymore. This meant that any potential prey animals were gone. He tried meditation and affecting the mana several times more, but other than observing it, he could not do anything at all. Powell also gathered a surplus of wood for the fire and scouted a little, but other than his chores, the day passed without any more drastic events. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the trees with a golden hue, the air cooled slightly, carrying the fresh, loamy scent of evening soil, marking the quiet end to his recovery. Chapter 9. Forced Decision. Gaia World. 3 days after the shattering, Powell spent the night alternating between uneasy sleep, tending to the fire, and trying to accomplish something with his new aura sight. Every rustle in the bushes, every bird or unseen bat fluttering by, put him on high alert. Who knew what lurked out there? Even another encounter with a spider might play out differently under the cover of darkness. Every time he had to move around the tent to feed the flames, his nerves tensed like guitar strings, vibrating with anticipation. The crackle of wood splitting under heat mingled with the distant hoot of an owl, and the cool night air carried the sharp tang of smoke laced with pine sap, grounding him even as it heightened his senses. One might expect he'd grow accustomed to the forest noises by now, but that single scuffle with the spider was enough to keep his nerves heightened, every snap of a twig echoing like a predator's stealthy approach. Sleep was uneasy and interrupted by those sounds anyway. Sessions of meditation rested him more than actual slumber, the rhythmic inhale of damp earth and faint herbal scents from the grass helping to center his mind amid the chaos. He repeated attempts to affect the green auras surrounding him, and observed those of different colors, which seemed to emerge from the distant anomaly, pulsing like faint veins in the night sky. But all attempts kept failing, and it did not seem that any energy inside him would be building up over time. He began the next day by consuming coffee from his thermos and the last of his energy bars. Powell spent around 2 hours waiting for some ducks to get within his slingshot range, crouched low amid the reeds by the pond's edge, the water's surface rippling gently with a faint, murky scent of algae and mud rising in the warming air. The birds paddled lazily, their quacks echoing softly across the still morning, feathers rustling as they preened. Finally, one ventured close enough, and with a steady breath he released the shot. The stone struck true, sending feathers scattering in a burst of startled flaps and splashes. He retrieved the duck, its warm body limp in his hands, the metallic tang of blood mixing with the pond's earthy dampness. Elation surged through him. This was real food, earned from the wild. But when trying to gut it and clean it with his hatchet, his only sharp tool, the blade proved too clumsy, hacking unevenly through feathers and flesh, the sticky warmth of innards clinging to his fingers with a raw, coppery smell. He needed something better for this. Later, while scouting the area, he stumbled upon a deer's skull half buried in the underbrush, its bone bleached white by sun and time, the faint, musty odor of decay lingering faintly. He decided to sharpen one of the antler tines against a rough stone, grinding it methodically until it formed a crude knife edge, the scraping sound rhythmic against the backdrop of buzzing insects and distant bird calls. He spent the rest of the day preparing the duck, plucking feathers that fluttered away on the breeze like soft whispers, gutting it with his new tool, and roasting it over the fire, the sizzling fat dripping with a savory, smoky aroma that made his mouth water. Between tasks, he gathered wood for the night, stacking branches that snapped crisply underfoot, their resinous scent sharp and invigorating. After 2 uneventful days of rest, Powell had fully recovered from the sudden fever. Finally having made a decision to linger in this area for a while, his mind settled into the new reality of gathering water, hunting small game, and scouting the immediate surroundings, slowly accepting this fresh life. It wasn't even that hard. In fact, this was close to his dreams. Living in nature, away from people, experiencing all that beauty. Powell gawked at the sun slowly dipping lower, casting elongated shadows from behind the trees, tainting the clouds in vivid red hues. The air cooled with a crisp edge, carrying the loamy scent of evening soil mingled with the faint, herbal whisper of crushed grass underfoot. If only there was nothing to attack me. Then again, perhaps that is even better. Magic and all. He pondered how to better use his time this night. There wasn't much he could do, but he knew he wouldn't be able to sleep. At home, he'd sit by the computer long past sunset. But here, well, I can always practice slingshot aim, but that gets old fast. His musings were interrupted by a loud cracking noise and rumble. Now, in the fading light of day, he could clearly see purple cracks expanding in the sky, behaving as if there was something more material in the air that could shatter. The noise startled birds from all around, their fluttering wings and frantic chirps combining with crows' harsh caws and a cacophony of animal cries, adding to the rumble of the anomaly itself and the trembling ground beneath his feet. The anomaly visibly expanded into the air, but now that this happened, Powell was suddenly struck with a thought. Is it expanding my way as well? I need to know. And so, his last task of the day was decided for him. He picked up his spear, ascended the slope, and took in the view. The cracks seemed to mostly reach out to the sides and upwards, so in that regard, Powell was safe. At the bottom of the anomaly, purple mist twisted and swirled uneasily after the growth, reaching out and down the hill that the base of the crack was situated on, as if licking the surroundings with its tentacles. In some places, ends of those misty limbs were separating, swirling for a while, and, oops! Powell squeaked and rushed back to his camp. What he saw in the mist suddenly made his camping spot much less appealing. The anomaly was spawning something alive. The things were not looking all that powerful, even though from a distance. Size was hard to estimate, but they were not big, perhaps knee-high. Their bodies were brown and elongated, shaped like tadpoles but with two short legs somewhere in the middle of their weird forms and a mouth on the wider side. A big mouth. Big brown land tadpoles. Not very threatening, right? Except there were many, and they would surely expand to Powell's camp and probably get lured by the water. How he was not attacked in his tent, while incapacitated by fever, or during the following 2 days, was a mystery. Perhaps nothing was spawning earlier. He pondered while frantically packing the tent. He stopped for a second, staring into the distance, thinking, no, it was spawning. The spider that first evening was probably it. Those things he saw today being spawned were not looking very dangerous. He could try killing some. Perhaps he'd get the ability to manipulate those auras again. Then he snapped back into reality. No, no. It was one thing to hunt something like those creatures, but spending the night, sleeping in a tent surrounded by so many? He needed to evacuate, and fast. Chapter 10. Into the night. Gaia World. 3 days after the shattering. Powell's hands shook as he crammed the last of his gear into his backpack. The tent bundled haphazardly, the sleeping pads strapped on top, his slingshot and hatchet shoved into side pockets. The purple cracks in the sky loomed ominously, their anomalous energy humming in the distance, spawning those knee-high tadpole things in erratic bursts. They scattered aimlessly at first, but he knew it wouldn't last. The pond nearby would draw them like a magnet, and his camp sat right in their path. No time for neatness, he muttered, slinging the pack over his shoulders with a grunt. The weight settled unevenly, but he ignored it, gripping his spear tightly in his right hand. He cast one last glance at the surroundings, making sure nothing was forgotten, turned his back to the slope with mysterious cracks in reality on top, and was about to take his first steps into the forest when movement caught his eye, a frantic rustle in the underbrush about 20 meters away. A small, raccoon-like animal burst from the bushes, its fur matted and streaked with mud, eyes wide with exhaustion. It was roughly the size of a large cat, with banded markings on its tail and a pointed snout, but its gait was labored, legs wobbling. It panted heavily, sides heaving, clearly at the end of its rope, running on fumes from whatever had chased it this far. Powell froze, instinctively shifting his spear to a ready position, point forward and braced against his hip. The motion was unconscious, born from the spider fight and his growing wariness of this world. And that's when he saw it. Trailing the weary creature by just a few meters, emerging from the same patch of bushes with a deliberate, unhurried waddle. The thing was exactly as he'd glimpsed from afar, knee-high when standing, shaped like a tadpole that had sprouted two stubby legs midway down its elongated body. Its front end widened into a bulbous head, with small beady eyes set close together, glinting like wet pebbles in the fading light. The skin, or hide, looked like it had been crudely sculpted from moist clay, clumps and ridges glued together in uneven patches, giving it a lumpy, almost handmade appearance. A subtle sheen coated its surface, as if perpetually damp, reflecting the sun's fading glow in faint, oily highlights. The color was a uniform reddish clay, earthy and unremarkable on its own, but it stood out starkly against the vivid greens of the surrounding grass and bushes, like a lump of fired pottery dropped amid lush foliage. From the head gaped a wide mouth, lined with sharp, triangular teeth arranged in a precise, even row, like serrated blades waiting to snap shut. Its tail tapered gradually, not the abrupt narrowing of a real tadpole, but a smooth, flowing transition to a narrow point that dragged slightly on the ground as it moved. It ambled forward on those two short legs, each step a deliberate plop against the soil. No other limbs to speak of, no arms, no fins, just that bizarre, bipedal waddle that propelled it with surprising steadiness. The raccoon thing spotted Powell and veered slightly, too tired to alter course much, but the tadpole's eyes locked onto his movement, the shift of the spear, the subtle tension in his stance. It halted abruptly, head tilting as if assessing this new, larger target. Then, without warning, its jaw began to chatter, teeth clacking together in a rapid, loud staccato, like castanets made of bone, echoing through the clearing with a menacing rhythm. The sound was unnerving, primal, designed to intimidate, or perhaps to signal its intent. Powell's heart pounded, adrenaline surging as he gripped the spear tighter. The creature crouched low on its stubby legs, coiling like a spring for just a second, its teeth still chattering furiously as it fixed him with those tiny eyes. With a sudden explosive leap, the tadpole launched itself forward, covering nearly 3 meters in a single bound, its body hurtling toward Powell's legs like a living projectile. He sidestepped instinctively, thrusting the spear downward in a reflexive jab. The point scraped across the creature's clay-like hide, skittering along the lumpy surface with a smooth, slushing sound, as if he'd struck a real lump of wet clay. Bits of the outer layer flaked off in moist clumps, leaving a gouged mark that revealed no veins or organs, just more of clay-like substance, like scraping the surface of fresh pottery. The tadpole landed with a thud, rolling once before righting itself, undeterred. It chattered again, louder this time, and coiled for another jump, clearly tracking Powell's every motion. Compared to the spider, this one was noticeably slower in its movements, giving him a precious moment to react. The raccoon thing, forgotten in the chaos, scampered past Powell and vanished into the forest, its exhausted scrabbling fading into the brush. Powell circled slowly, keeping his eyes on the tadpole, spear at the ready. "Come on, you lump of mud," he growled under his breath, his voice steady despite the fear knotting his gut, pretending to be more confident than felt. This thing was no spider in terms of speed, but its predatory gaze chilled him. It tracked his shifts, reacting to the motion, its small eyes unblinking. It leaped again, aiming higher this time, straight for his groin. Powell swung the spear like a club, connecting solidly with the side of its head. The impact jarred his arms, the hide yielding slightly like wet clay under the blow, but it sent the creature tumbling sideways. It hit the ground with a thud, rolling away. Powell used this opportunity to create even more distance to safely scan surroundings for more attackers. It was still just one-on-one. Creature, undaunted, scrambled back up, chattering its teeth in rapid fury, and charged once more, waddling forward to close the gap before leaping. But instead of changing its charge into a jump fluidly, it stopped in preparation again. This time, Powell was ready. As it coiled, he lunged, driving the spear's point straight into its open mouth. The triangular teeth clamped down instinctively, but the force of his thrust pushed through, piercing the outer clay layer with a squelch. Inside, the tissues were softer, yielding like damp sponge as the spear sank deeper. The tadpole thrashed wildly, its body convulsing as ichor, thick and brownish like diluted mud, oozed from the wound. Powell twisted the spear, grinding it deeper, using his weight to pin monster to the ground. It writhed for what felt like an eternity, legs kicking futilely, tail whipping against the dirt. But gradually its movements slowed, the chattering fading to a weak click before stopping altogether. Powell yanked the spear free, stepping back warily, breath coming in gasps from excitement. The creature lay still, its clay-like form crumbling slightly at the edges, as if drying out in death. Then, just like the spider before it, it dissolved into a puff of purple mist, swirling briefly, but this time it dissipated into the air instead of chasing Powell. A faint warmth spread through Powell's veins regardless. Not the burning from before, but something subtler. He was momentarily tempted to test if something changed with his new senses, but he could not afford distraction. The man glanced at the purple cracks rising menacingly into the sky in the distance. Then at his DIY spear. It was already damaged from creature's teeth gnashing on it, but still usable. He shouldered his pack tighter and hurried away, spear still clutched like a lifeline, weaving deeper into the forest.